Hi, it's Pete here. This is See Your Toes Again, podcast number 38, and I have a special guest whose name is Mia Mendez. Mia has had I believe, a bit of an interesting life as far as various mental health conditions are concerned. So that's what I'm hoping we're going to talk about today. Would you like to chat a little bit about? So when did you first figure out that something wasn't right as far as your mental health was concerned?
Yeah, nothing was ever right. It's so funny when people ask me that question. It was right from the gate. It was never, I
Oh,
never had
really?
oh, literally, really from as far back as I can remember. I only remember feeling normal, whatever that is, just kind of without terrible
Mm,
anxiety and depression. Only the first couple of years, because I have very early memories. So I actually have a memory of crawling. I have early memories, and I remember not feeling terrible. So maybe 1 years old, maybe 2 years old, but pretty much 99% of my life, I've suffered from at least anxiety and sadness. And so that started
mm,
very young age. I was a sad child. I was a very, very anxious child. I was adopted, so I was in a family that's blood wise, it's not my own. I looked different. I felt different. I acted different. They didn't understand me. And also, they were unstable in their own right. So, my adoptive father was an alcoholic, and my adoptive mother was also just not stable, um, just
yeah, okay.
very dysregulated. And I was a sensitive child. So that's a really bad mix of not only dealing with being given up for yeah, adoption, but also being placed in a home that's not stable. So the sadness and the anxiety began very, very young and continued. And it just continued to grow. And across 30 years, I would just keep getting more and more diagnoses and
Mm,
just keep getting, worse and not able to, function or hold a job, finish my education. Um, so the chronic depression is pretty much lifelong, and the borderline's pretty much there for the whole, since teenagehood, at least teenage years. Um, some learning issues, reading issues, some speech disturbances, possible on the spectrum, apparently. Um, and then the bipolar, somewhere in my 20s, but I was not diagnosed. I was diagnosed in my 30s. Um, then, I had the bipolar as the cherry on top of all this other
mm,
mess. And
yeah.
yeah, so I had, and again, I was also, well, not again, I haven't mentioned this. I was a young mom. So at 18, I had my first child. And then I had three more because I had no
Okay.
control over my life or anything that I did. And I, decided to keep them. Um, so became a single mom with borderline personality and bipolar 2 disorder. And it was pure hell, pure
Mm,
absolute hell
God,
the
it would have
entire
been.
time that I raised my children. Awful, terrible, awful.
Did you did your personality change around the children? Did you feel any better after them? Was there what I call postnatal depression, which apparently is called something else over here. But anyway, it means depression after you have a baby.
Yeah, postpartum depression.
Yeah, that's the one, postpartum. Um, did no,
I didn't.
you didn't feel any different. I mean, you're feeling pretty.
No, I didn't. Believe it. Yeah, we have a little bit of a lag, by the way.
Yeah, it's I
Yeah, that's
figured that
okay.
out. Yeah.
Um, but so the kids, I didn't have postpartum. It was just my normal rageful, borderline self and unstable bipolar
Mm,
self. In addition, now to the stress of children, I also have OCD. So the wanting to try to make them look perfect, keep them perfect, and keep the house perfect was obviously impossible.
yeah.
And so that was an additional level of madness that we all had to experience. So, yes, bipolar has
Mm,
been a disaster, like it is for most of us who have suffered from it. And I didn't have that much success with medications because I couldn't get through the side effects. When you're trying different medications, you have to go through adjustment periods and side effects to see, is this going to work? What do we need to adjust? Maybe we need to try all over again with different cocktail of medications. With four kids, I couldn't get through that adjustment
mm,
period. So I didn't until they were a little bit older have much success with medication. Talk therapy is pretty much useless. I did have a few hospitalizations when I was young. It's just a waste of time. Um, but then, so 7, 8 years ago, I was just not, I don't, so I also have an issue, a lifelong issue with leaving the house. Okay. So when it was at its worst, my mental health, I was not leaving for months and rarely over many years. And I had gotten to a point where I was done. I just said I need to do something. And one summer I crawled, pretty much scraped and crawled, pulled myself out of the house during one summer. And I said, I have to get on some type of medication or something because I'm dying. I
mm.
felt like I was
Yeah,
dying.
understandably.
And luckily, yeah, luckily that psychiatrist at least got me less suicidal. I had always had a preoccupation with suicide. It's never left. It's just constant. And I got a little stable, not a ton, but at least I was not stuck to my couch and obsessing with suicide 24/7. Um, don't know what happened after that, but I eventually became pretty much homeless. I had two of the kids at the time. The other two were on their own. One was in the Marines. The other lived in California, but I had my two younger ones. And because of my,
Right. So at this stage, yeah, okay. So at this stage, the kids are a bit
mhm,
older.
yeah. Um, and so I had just had the two younger ones, and they're all close in age. So they were like, I don't know, 14, 15, or 16. Um, and we lost our housing. We lost everything because I still could not work. I still couldn't function. And that was really bad because then we were separated for a little while. And fast forward, we got to a point where I felt like living this way. I didn't have any hope. What else was there? I tried medication. I tried a lot of different things, and I still couldn't function. I still couldn't do anything. I couldn't even leave the house.
Mm,
I made the decision. I'm like, I'm done. I am making plans. I'm looking for my urn. I am planning my goodbye party, pretty much, and I'm planning how I'm going to make a sales pitch to my kids to let me go. And because it was just, I felt like it was an injustice and it was inhumane to expect for anyone to expect me to exist and go on in that with that level of mental torture. It was nothing less
mm,
than mental torture what was going on in my mind relentlessly at that point.
yeah, I can understand that. Must have, yeah, there's no words for it. So, yeah. So it would have been devastating too when you had your child removed from you, because that I guess that would almost have been seen as the last straw.
Yeah, they weren't removed. We just had no place to go, so they went with friends. I didn't lose
Okay.
custody, but we had to be separated because I didn't know where we were all going to go. Eventually, I had my daughter again. We just
Mm,
had a room. I couldn't even afford an apartment. It was just a room that we lived in together. And my son was okay with a friend not too far away. Um, but that was the best that I could do at the time, and it was just it was not acceptable. Um, no one ever told me about diet and mental health. I did have a very good inkling because um, a very good inclination because I had noticed how pasta specifically would cause an even deeper depression when I would eat it.
mm.
And I eventually went grain free. I went grain free first. Didn't know anything about keto, but I was grain free for a couple of years.
Wow.
And I did, yeah, and I did feel a little bit better, just a little bit, not, still very sick, but I noticed the connection between pasta specifically. I mean, I have never touched pasta since for 6 years, or actually more, because I had started the grain free before keto. But so yeah, I knew the connection. I always loved, the topic of health and nutrition and exercise, and it's always been an interest. So I knew that that's one thing that I hadn't fully tried was a complete and utter overhaul of the way that I ate because I wasn't eating pasta, but I was an absolute food addict, sugar addict. I'm talking I couldn't sleep through the night without waking up and having cookies. I couldn't make it without sugar.
Yeah, I can understand that too, because when you're in that, yeah, mental frame, of course your brain is screaming out for all sorts of things, and I would have thought sugar would be one of those things that was screaming out for, and it probably made you feel a little bit better. Incidentally, Mia, during this process, did you end up putting lots of weight on, or was your weight fairly stable through it?
What so two other things really affected the weight at the time, the damn antidepressants.
Yeah.
It was the antidepressants that packed on the weight. And then I had also a pretty well in hindsight it was really an unnecessary hysterectomy. So between the hysterectomy and the psych meds, I did gain 50 pounds at least. I'm small. I'm just under 5'3", so that was a lot of weight. And I was also suffering from debilitating chronic pain amongst all the psychiatric issues. I was having chronic pain and also spontaneous tears, partial labral tears in my hips, knees, and shoulders, which the pain is unbelievable. And there
Mm,
was um, no found cause for my chronic pain or my injuries, these spontaneous injuries. I went to endocrinologist, orthopedic surgeon, uh, endocrinologist. What's the other one? Rheumatologist. I did my due diligence. They're like, no, your blood work looks great. Blood work looks great,
Yeah.
but I'm just suffering so terribly, and I never had issues with the blood sugar. They don't test fasting insulin on a regular blood panel, which is ridiculous, but blood sugar was fine. So yes, my health was continuing to deteriorate. I gained weight, and that obviously exacerbated all of my
Mm.
problems and symptoms. Yeah,
Yeah. And if you're eating all those sugary foods, then obviously you're going to be packing it on, but then you're packing it on and eating all those foods because that's what your brain is telling you to do, and it's I guess to a certain degree it's a way out. It's an escape. I feel like crap. I might eat some more cookies.
for sure. It was right. It was an absolute addiction, no different than other substances that people use to numb emotional pain.
Mm.
Mine was absolutely, sugar and carbs. And I'm also an emotional eater. That's how I never had any issues with substances or alcohol. My thing was food, and it was always food.
Mm.
Specifically, I'm a big chocolate and cheese addict. And as I got older, I realized how addicting those things are. Cheese, because of the opioid effect that it has. So that was actually a medication for me. That's how I was using it. And chocolate has also it has the caffeine in it, and
Yeah.
it has other things that are, elevate your mood. So those were my drugs: chocolate and cheese and sugar. And of course, yeah, you get a short term kind of a short term relief. But obviously, over time, it just makes matters worse, just
Yeah.
like any other addiction.
Yeah.
And so like I had said, I was always interested in nutrition, no, but there was no doctor or any, you know, professional or expert that ever told me, hey, why don't you try the keto diet or try any particular diet? I was never asked about what I ate and all of that. I figured it out myself.
Mm.
Um, so let me rewind a little bit. So I'm planning my suicide, and I realized that I hadn't tried.
That's right. Yep. You're working out your you're working out your party. That's right.
Yes.
Yep.
And I just kept hearing this whisper. Um, and this whisper was saying, stop telling yourself that you've tried everything and that you have the right to off yourself. That's bullshit. You haven't tried to overhaul your diet completely. So stop telling yourself you have the right to do this. And it just was so persistent. And I said to this voice, I said, okay. I stumbled upon the ketogenic diet, and I saw one blip somewhere on the internet that it could help with mental health. Just stumbled upon it. And I said, oh my God, no sugar. How is that possible? I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do that, but I have to figure out a way. I have to figure out a way how to do this, because this is it. It's my last hope. So I said to myself and the voice, I said, okay, I'm going to do this one last thing, and then I'm out of here. I'm done. Then I can say I've done everything,
Yep.
and I can go to the next plane. Um, and it happened to work very, very quickly for me. And it's 6 years later since I started the ketogenic way of eating, and I have not
Wow.
seen bipolar since.
It must have been getting back to that. when as you initially started the no sugar ketogenic diet, that must have been for, like you said, a sugar addict. That must have been like, as if my life isn't crap enough, now I'm going to remove the one thing that I've been enjoying. So I can imagine that would have been,
Absolutely, literally.
yeah, yeah. It's okay if you like self harm. It's like, how can, oh, I know I can harm myself through nutrition. I can really make myself unhappy through nutrition. But yeah, and let's face it, without sugar and you're fine. You don't even think about it. But when you're a sugar addict, I can imagine it's a bit like, well, I've given
Yeah.
up smoking and I know what that was like. Every minute of the day, you're thinking about a cigarette. Um, so that must have been pretty darn hard at a period when you were mentally unstable. I think that's a fair comment to make.
Yes, absolutely. It was my crutch. Food and sweets specifically were the way that I coped. I had no other tools at the time. I hadn't found any effective any effective talk therapies, or I didn't have any money to get any fancy, therapies. I mostly had state insurance, which in the US it's like a Medicaid, which is awful. And so the medical professionals that you have access to, it's basic stuff. They're not going to cure you of
Yeah,
anything. And so yes, sweets and sugar, that was the way that I coped. And it's not only, let me explain coping, okay? I'm talking food and sweets were my therapist, my friend. They cured my loneliness temporarily. They cured, my hopelessness sometimes temporarily. It was just so much more than just eating stuff and enjoying it. I had nothing else to enjoy. There was nothing else good aside from chocolate
yeah,
and cheese in my life. I had nothing else.
yeah. And so, can you run through for us what those first few weeks entailed? I'm not trying to dig on the pain of it all, but on what you decided to eat and what you cut out of eating. I mean, it's easy to say, "Oh, I cut out of all the sugar," but a lot of people don't even realize what that actually entails, because there's one thing to stop eating your chocolate and your cookies, but let's face it, sugar's hidden everywhere. So, um, can you go through a little bit of just what you
Mm.
chose to eat? This is somebody, of course, who you're starting off afresh. You're not a nutritionist. You're not a chemist. You're not a biologist, and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to get rid of sugar out of my diet. That's a major step for somebody who um, it's not as even as if you've been wandering around the shops looking at stuff, because you're stuck at home hiding behind the couch.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was no way with the level of sugar that I was consuming that I could do a hard stop.
Okay,
There was absolutely no way. It was out of the question. I never even thought about doing that. Never even crossed my mind. I said,
good.
there's no way. So what I did was I had this mindset of I'm going to head in the direction. I know what keto is. It's all the way over there. I know what it looks like. It's all the way over there. I'm just going to I'm going to head towards it. I'm not even going to commit to doing it. I'm just going to day by day, week by week, cut non keto stuff out little by little. So there's no bread. Of course, pasta was gone. The bread, I think I had, maybe I didn't get rid of it mostly, but I wasn't a big bread eater because I realized it
Yep.
made me feel like crap. But the pasta went, the rice had to go, then the bread went. Then I had to not to eat junk food. So that went, but then I had to find other things to kind of replace it. That's what I did. I had to replace, like I took Cheetos away, and then I said, well, just have a roll up of cold cuts, um, which I'm sure, I don't know, I don't know what you call it, but it's sliced deli meats.
Yep. Yep.
So I would just like replace things and keep cutting out carbs. I loved potatoes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Loved sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
And so I was eating very dark chocolate. I still could have my cheese and my dairy, which made it very easy for me. I didn't have to give that up
Nope.
yet. And I realized one day, I was like, okay, I'm just eating the dark chocolate. It wasn't totally keto, but it was better than milk chocolate.
Yeah.
And the only non keto food that I was eating was a little bit of sweet potato. And I was like, wow, I'm almost there. I'm like, I'm almost there and I'm okay. It's a big jump though from just getting rid of that sweet potato and that type of chocolate. It was actually a huge jump. Um, but I did it, and I would fall off once a week for a while. I would just be ravenous. I'm like, I need chocolate and I need this and I need that. And so I would cheat once a week.
Mm-hmm.
I would rely heavily on all the keto, like the keto sweetener. I had to rely on a lot of keto sweeteners, and I would make a keto mug cake and I would devour it, sometimes overeat it, but it was better than going and getting a cake from or junk food from the market. So that was like my middle,
For sure.
yeah, that was my middle ground.
Exactly.
Was just getting a lot of keto stuff,
Mm.
which I'll probably get to that later. But so week by week, I was just a little bit more keto, and
It worked as a bridge. Yeah.
absolutely right. That's what I did, was the bridging, really. And so week by week, every other week,
Mm.
it became a little bit more easier. And then finally I started to get into ketosis, and I knew it because I was like, whoa, I'm very tired. Because the electrolyte game with the keto flu is something that you need to really study and know about it. So I was getting the salt, I was getting other things in, but the doctor that I was following was just, he's like, just rest if you can, just rest, because there's a lot of renovating going on at the cellular level with the mitochondria and inside your cells. Everything is overhauling. It's switching to um, being it's learning how to use the ketones and burn fat for fuel, and switch from glucose to the ketones. And so it's a process. So I understood. I'm like, okay, I'm in it. It's happening.
Mm.
And I just rested and I took my electrolytes, and probably maybe 6 weeks in, I wish I was recorded my progress or did some sort of a diary. I didn't at the time, but 6 weeks in, I was already a different person. I woke up one day and really I felt a calm in my system that I had never, when I say never, I had never experienced the calm, the focus, the lack of anxiety. I could go outside. I wasn't depressed. My body had energy. The bed and the couch didn't feel like a giant magnet anymore. And I said, if I'm like, is this how normal people, feel? I'm like, is this what it feels like to be healthy and normal? It blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. I couldn't understand what held anyone back in life. I'm like, if this is what other people feel like, what holds them back? So, now the total lack of anxiety, it didn't last, but what the anxiety that I deal with now is nothing in compared to what I dealt with pre keto. So for me, it was pretty quick, and it was
Mm.
a miraculous change in my functioning.
Wow. Uh, excuse me. And that's the funny thing about it. Like you said, when you were so ill, and you've been so ill all of your life, that you had no idea what normal felt like. So, and when you came off and became properly keto, and I know this from personal experience, there is a level of euphoria there and the amount of energy you have. And I think this is for anybody. So, you suddenly have this bounding positive energy in your bloodstream, literally. And I think if a normal person feels like that, then you must have been bouncing off the walls. It's like, um, yeah, I could imagine that would have felt pretty bloody good.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, and it wasn't hypomania. I know some people get a little hypomanic. Some people can get hypomanic. It wasn't that. I wasn't hyper. I just felt wonderful.
Mm,
That's it. It wasn't
yeah.
even it wasn't even a euphoria. It was this calm. It was this
Mm,
peace. And my memory, because I had issues with, I had cognitive issues. And so my memory was better. I could listen to people and follow what they were saying. I could remember, I could access like my vocabulary better. I had less problems with speech. The auditory processing disorder that I have, it is better. I can focus more and follow more a little bit better than I used to. Um, and my tinnitus went away. I woke up. I think it was 6 months, 3 or 6 months later, and I'm in the room, and I'm like, oh my god! I'm like, I don't hear ringing anymore,
mm,
and couldn't believe that one. Um, and then also when I was feeling so good, my chronic pain disappeared. I went through a phase where I felt no pain anywhere in my body. And I remember doing squats and moving my joints, and I'm like, wait, there's got to be pain somewhere.
yeah. Yeah. Where are
And I
you
couldn't
hiding?
find any pain. And I'm just yeah, I'm like, wait, what? So um it just for me it was, a panacea, really. It was the closest thing to it. And of course, it made me very passionate about metabolic therapy. And at the time, there was no Chris Palmer. I didn't know about him. I didn't know why it worked. I had no idea why it worked until 4 years later.
Mm,
So I was just my own guinea pig and my own mad scientist. I had no idea that there were doctors actually trying to get the word out, do more research. And then, yeah, 2 or 3 years ago, I came upon Dr. Chris Palmer, and he had the answers. Why would this work? Why would this be, so effective for me? And then since then, I've just been connecting with people like yourself and other metabolic professionals and clinicians, and um, just doing everything that I can to spread the word that there is hope, and it doesn't always have to involve medication.
no. And that's the thing is most people, and understandably, most people think, how can changing food make any difference? Yeah, you're pulling my leg because how can just not eating this and eating that instead make any difference whatsoever? But of course, once you understand the science behind it, you realize that you're actually, like you mentioned before, you're changing your body at the cellular level. Your your cells and every cell of your body are learning to use fats as an energy source instead of sugars. And we've we haven't, but the scientists and all of the people in white lab coats have figured out that sugars do all sorts of funny, dangerous things to your body. They retard it, they slow it down, they prevent your little mitochondria from producing energy, and instead they make them produce fat. Um, they screw up your hormones, they screw up how satiated you feel, so therefore you eat more because you don't feel full. The list of what sugars do to your body is just endless. And so that's where, of course, you and I have changed our diets and got rid of the sugars out of our diets, and your whole life changes quite dramatically. And until these other people, of course, have felt that and understand it and done it more than 5 days, um, then they've got no idea what you're talking about. But it is miraculous, the difference. So I'm personally amazed with you because
Mhm.
you did that on your own without anybody telling you do this, do that, nobody holding your hand, nobody saying this is what you have to do. And I also, it's funny, a few weeks ago, I was talking to somebody, and I've always been the cold turkey kind of guy when it comes to switching over from standard to ketogenic.
Mm.
I've I've written a book, and in the book, I said, this is how you do it: cold turkey. Stop eating today. And the lady I was speaking with said, "Oh, no, 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 we wean people off." That's odd. And then I've spoken to several other people, and I've realized that for a majority of people, weaning off is a much better way to go about it. Where, you're literally chopping out. For her, it was, okay, today I'm going to chop out sugar. Tomorrow I'm going to chop out bread. Next week I'm going to get rid of other forms of carb. Then I'm going to get rid of all of me junk food and so on. And so it took maybe a month to go from standard to ketogenic diet. So, and I can understand that it'll be much easier for a lot of people, and you end up at the same place after a month.
Absolutely. And the other reason why doing it gradually will work for a lot of people is because a lot of us that have the bipolar and these other psychiatric diagnoses, we have trauma. Okay. And when you have trauma wounds and you've got a difficult childhood and you have all of these things that are unresolved in your system, when you try to do a big change, sometimes they'll double down all
Mm,
of those triggers that you have with, like, if you were raised kind of neglected or unseen, or it was not stable, like in my case, my coping strategy, my everything, it was food and sugar. If you take that away, now my trauma is being re-triggered. Very difficult for those parts of me that have been traumatized. I do inner child work and a lot of and a little bit of internal family systems. I don't know if you're familiar with those two modalities, but those are huge. And so when you have these different parts of yourself that have been left behind or have gone through traumatic events, when you try to take away the things that calm them down, not good.
mm,
They will come back with a vengeance sometimes.
yeah.
So it's very good to be gentle with yourself when you do have a history of complex trauma
Mm.
specifically.
So as you got rid of all of those bad foods, all the sugary foods, the junk foods, the processed foods, the breads and the pastas and the rice and all that sort of stuff, what you mentioned, like your deli food, what else did you eat? What was your mainstay of food? Did you eat lots of meat?
So over the past 6 years, the way that I eat has changed. And almost every year, I think I eat a different type of keto. So I started with, and I think this was a really good way to start. I started with a very, very heavy veggie keto. So most of my plate was just sauteed in a little bit of coconut oil. It was sauteed cruciferous veggies. So I loved Brussels sprouts, and I loved spinach and cauliflower and asparagus and all of that stuff. And I would just go to town, eat as much as I wanted, fat all over it. And then I would have, maybe 3, 4 ounces of protein. And that worked very, very, very well. But I wanted to eat more protein. Like, I just wanted protein. And
Mm,
so over, I don't know when that happened, but maybe I think it was the first year that I was keto. I heard a nurse somewhere online, somewhere in Internetville. She goes, "Well, if you drop the veggies, you could eat twice the protein." And I said, "What? I don't have to eat veggies and I can have protein?" Like,
It's funny you said that. I don't have to eat veggies because we're all brought up. Eat your damned veggies. Eat your veggies. I don't want to eat my
yeah,
veggies.
absolutely. Yeah, so I dropped the veggies and I became a lot more protein based. So I would just eat less veggies and more protein, and I was just so much happier. It was also easier for me to do because I don't like cooking, and I'm just chopping up tons of vegetables just twice a day. And it was just, I didn't enjoy it. But fast forward, I really
Mm,
became more protein based keto. Um, Less vegetables. I love a lot of fat. I love butter. Even 6 years in, I still like a lot of fat.
mm-hmm.
But
Mm,
now I'm beef heavy. Doing a beef heavy keto without any vegetables, I feel like I've gotten the best results that way. Um,
yeah.
I can't do chicken and I can't do even fish. I can eat it, but I'm saying it can't be the primary source of protein for me, because beef, beef just lights up my brain in the best way possible. There is nothing that activates my cognitive abilities like beef. So I have to eat beef pretty much every single day. Beef and butter, nice thick steak
Mm,
with a lot of butter, literally eating pieces of butter on the steak. And the next day, my memory is just so much better. I'm just more positive. Just a little smarter,
mm,
my brain works better. And so, coming from a very heavy veggie keto, now at 6 years later, I'm heavy beef keto. So almost close to, closer to carnivore, but
yeah. Yeah, I was going to say that.
I
Yeah.
still have I still have some sweets and stuff, keto
Yep.
sweets.
Yep. Okay. Because it's funny you said that because a lot of people eat a lot of vegetables, of course. And so there's like, well, okay, I can go on keto. And in fact, I was speaking to two people on my holiday a couple of weeks ago on a bus trip. If they're listening, they'll know. They said, but we're vegetarian, we can't do keto. And I said, I'm sure you can. I've heard of ketogenic vegetarians before. I
Mm-hmm.
said, your problem is to make sure that you get enough fat and
Mm-hmm.
protein. And they were at the time buttering a piece of bread, and I said, "Well, you can have the butter, you just can't have the bread." Um, and so I actually put out on my Twitter space, I said on my X space, I said, "Does anybody know of a keto vegetarian? I'd love to get him into the podcast, him or her into a podcast." And honestly, you could have heard. It's like one of those old Western movies where you've got the tumbleweed rolling down the road. Literally, nobody came back to me whatsoever. So, if there is a keto
I know
vegetarian
two.
out there,
I know two of
sorry,
them.
all right, maybe you could we could talk afterwards and see if we can get somebody on to have a chat.
Yeah.
Um, because obviously, for the people who like lots of vegetables and don't like the idea of meat, then it doesn't mean you can't do keto. It just means you have to try a bit harder.
There's a lot of supplementation that would have to happen.
Mm,
And
yeah,
the protein
yeah,
is huge. You have to have adequate protein.
yeah. Yes, because you can easily fill yourself up on all that vegetation, like you did. You were filling yourself up on the vegetation, which is all carbohydrate, and then not having enough space for the good stuff. So, for the stuff that is needed to build your body back up. Um, but the other thing you said was when for quite a while I ate lots of chicken. I did eat red meat, but I ate lots of chicken. And then as I
Hmm.
became sort of further and further heading towards carnivore, sounds very similar to you, I found my desire to eat red meat far outweighed my desire to eat chicken meat. I was always eating thighs and things. I was eating the fatty
Yeah.
cuts on a chicken, but I don't know. There's just something more satiating about eating red meat. I do extend the red meat from just beef to lamb and
Hmm.
pork as well.
Hmm. Lamb and beef, that seems to be the two types of protein that have that are most nutrient dense. So with some clients who I'm looking at what they're eating, and I asked them, "You think you could do any more beef in your diet? Can you afford it? How can we?" And they said, "Okay, yeah, sure. Why?" And I'm like, "It might make the difference."
Mm,
So people who have not only bipolar but a lot of cognitive issues, by my adjusting their beef intake, actually made the difference. It calmed their nervous system down further. It regulated their nervous system down further, and it helped them to eliminate the brain fog and other cognitive issues that come up with neuro metabolic dysfunction. That's really what we're talking about.
mm. And incidentally, for people listening, you don't have to get the expensive cuts. People think, oh, beef, they're thinking of steak, filet mignon. You're eating the fatty steak. You're eating the fatty mince. Don't buy the 5% mince. Buy the 20%. Well, I normally buy the 10% because the 20% mince tends to, most of the fat just goes straight out when you warm it up. But yeah, you don't have to buy the expensive cuts, is what I'm saying.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, here in the U.S., I would. There are definitely, yeah, you could do stew meat, which is less expensive, and ground beef, which is less expensive. You don't have to do grass fed if you can't afford it. You don't even have to eliminate, nitrate filled stuff in the beginning. If you're in ketosis because you're eating those deli meats and some processed meats and a hot dog and cheese, if that is the best that you could do for at that time, and you're in ketosis and you're feeling better, then let it go. Sure, you would want to try to clean it up in the future, but if that's all you can afford and you're in ketosis, then I think people should give themselves a break.
Yeah, well spent. And the other interesting thing about it, or the other thing to bear in mind for people who are thinking, oh, it does sound expensive, is though when you have your shopping trolley, it's kind of nearly damned empty because you haven't got all of that bread, all of the buns, all of the cakes and the
Mm-hmm.
biscuits and the Pringles and
Cereal.
yeah, all that crap. You haven't got any. You haven't got a big bag of potatoes. Um, Everything that is amazing. You'd be the same. You go into a supermarket and you see people with their shopping trolleys that are full, and they put all of their food on the conveyor belt to get to the checkout person. And I'm looking through and thinking, of those 20 items, I can see two that I'd buy. And all the rest costs
Mm-hmm.
some money, and it has the other 18 will have no nutritional value at all. And it costs them a fortune. So when you do switch to ketogenic or carnivore, then you find that yes, your individual meats might be a bit more expensive, but your overall value should be no more expensive because you're saving on all that other clutter.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, my when I go to the store, I mean, I have like a bag. I have one bag, two bags maybe, every time I go, and it's a lot of meat.
Yeah.
It's avocados maybe. I do still like bacon. Sometimes I like sausage and stuff like that. Um, and I do have a sweetener that I have if I need something sweet. I'll do that. But yeah, you're really just switching from spending your money on a lot of poor habits and investing in just high quality. So you're buying less, you're buying less, but you're buying higher quality foods.
Mm,
So it's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible.
no. You mentioned a minute ago, you mentioned ketosis and checking that you're in ketosis. How do you go about that, Mia?
Yeah, I don't check regularly anymore. There's just no need to. Once in a while, I'll order my ketone strips, and I'll just see where I'm at. But I always used a blood meter. I never wasted my time with urine strips or the breath measurement. It was always the blood meter. That's the most accurate way to measure ketones. And yeah, I'm not a super ketone producer. Not one of those. I have some clients that are like, they blow my mind. They just produce ketones very easily. I'm on the lower end. Um, if I'm doing really well, sure, I can get to uh, in the twos. But I'm mainly, about 1.2 or even a little bit lower, and I feel fine. I feel fine in that range.
Mm,
Everybody's different.
yeah.
Everybody's different. Higher is not necessarily better. That's a myth.
So, with regard to your the people who is would you call them your patients, your customers, your clients?
Clients, yeah.
Okay, with your clients, do you get them to check their ketones at the start, or and on a regular basis, or how do they go about that?
It depends on their financial situation because sometimes they come to me and they've already purchased the urine strips, and I said, okay, well, you can use the urine strips for 3 weeks max, because beyond there you're just going to see no ketones registering on your urine strips because your body's utilizing it better. That's why they disappear. It's not because you're out of ketosis.
Yeah, that's right. For anyone who listens, the ketone strips like that, you're quite
Yes.
right. They're measuring ketones that are getting wasted in your urine. So as soon as your body and all the lovely little mitochondria get their act together, they say, we're not going to waste this stuff.
Yeah.
So then people panic because they're not
Exactly.
in ketosis. They are, but the little strip ain't working, is all. So sorry to interrupt. We've got, incidentally, for any listener, we've got a bit of a lag here. We had a hell of a time getting started today. So I'll try to edit it out, but that's why there's a bit of a lag and we end up talking over each other. So my apologies.
Um, so of course it's ideal that that we're tracking the ketones, especially in the beginning, because not everybody reacts to keto sweeteners the same. Not everybody reacts to dairy the same. Some people need to get rid of dairy for their ketones to be where they need to be. Um, Sometimes certain fats might help or not help a person's ketone levels. So, in the beginning, probably the first 3 months, especially, I think it's very important to measure both glucose and ketones regularly so we can see how different foods affect,
Mm,
each person.
yeah, good call. Do you use coconut oil much?
I actually do. I know that I what we have to do is have a balanced fat, a balanced fat profile with the omegas. So I use all kinds of oils. I use butter. I use tallow. I do use coconut oil because I like the way that it tastes. Um, Olive oil and avocado oil. That's pretty much what I use. But I encourage people to use tallow, honestly. Tallow, butter, ghee, um, and then you can definitely mix in the other
Mm,
oils, the avocado, the olive, and the coconut oil. So I do use coconut oil.
yeah, and it's
Well, and MCT, of course. We can't forget MCT
yeah.
oil.
I must admit, with MCT, I didn't give it a long enough try. It gave me stomach cramps, and I won't tell you what followed the stomach cramps, but I tried it a number of times. Every time it gave me
Mhm.
stomach cramps and other stuff. And so then I put it in the cupboard and left it there for
Yeah,
something like 2 years before I threw it away. I should have given it more of a go because I believe your stomach kind of gets used to it. Um, but I do use coconut oil, which is basically the raw product, isn't it, of MCT oil. So I use that mainly for cooking, to be frank, because I can cook up
Hmm.
bacon. Man, bacon goes deliciously crisp when it's swimming around in coconut oil on the pan,
Oh, wow.
and it smells delicious. It makes the whole room smell like you're on holiday.
I love it. Yeah, with MCT oil, you have to actually build up a tolerance to it. So some people have to start not only just with a teaspoon, some people have to start with half a teaspoon. And then every few days, or maybe even once a week, um, not once a week, every week, you will just increase it by a teaspoon or even a teaspoon, because that is something that you have to build tolerance to.
Mm,
For me, for example, not only do I have, the gastric stuff going on, but it'll kick up my anxiety. This was before I was adjusted to it.
right.
It would just give me way too much anxiety. I'm like, I can't. But now I have a pretty good tolerance for it. Doesn't bother me anymore.
Hmm. Because it's supposed to have all sorts of wonderful health benefits and especially help get people into ketosis even when they aren't on a ketogenic diet. So it's given to people, for example, with Parkinson's disease and with Alzheimer's and stuff, as
Hmm.
a mental health thing. Okay, now a big question that I've got for you is the word exercise.
Yeah. Spotlight is on me right now. Okay, so in the beginning of when you're going through keto adaptation, I don't recommend vigorous exercise. I think that you need to do calm things, gentle walks. And I've spoken to other, doctors, and they also agree in the beginning, you want to take it easy a little bit. You want
Mm,
your cortisol levels to kind of just stay chill and just let your body get through the adaptation and just take it easy. Now, once you're fat adapted, working out can overall increase your ketones. Sometimes it drops initially for some people who work out, but overall, I think it's amazing for your mental health and for your mitochondria, of course. I am guilty. I don't exercise a whole lot, but I've had a lot of changes in my life and a lot of moves and other things going on. But I do try to get sunlight constantly. I'm just always in the sun and get, fresh air and try to
mm,
not be sitting, just moving my body. But no, exercise is huge for mental stability and cognition. It will help overall your brain function and your nervous system
mm.
to
Okay,
regulate. So I think it's very important.
that's good. No, no, that's interesting
Did I
actually.
answer
Like you,
your question?
yeah, and like you said, yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to drop you on the spot like that. Um, but
No,
you're
it's
right.
okay.
A
No,
lot
I
of
just feel bad because I don't exercise. I feel
yeah.
guilty.
No, that's fine, and that's why I don't ask these things at the start because we want people's truthful opinions, what people actually do, not what you should be doing or what somebody else says you should be doing. It is important, like you say, that when somebody who has got bipolar or depression or anxiety and or a mixture, and they're thinking, okay, I'll go on this diet, I'll give it a go. What's left? Like you said, what's left? I'll give this a damn go. And then somebody says, "Oh, but you've got to get out and exercise." Well, it's just too much too soon. So,
Mhm.
and so same with a lot of people who are chronically obese. You get the skinny people saying, "Oh, you just need to exercise more and eat less." Well, it's not like that. It's not that easy. And one step at a time. And step one is getting the switch over to ketogenic. And then at that stage, think about other things. But it is interesting that you don't do a lot of exercise yourself because there's lots of people out there who I see it as like, I don't want to do exercise. I really don't feel like it. Do you go for walks? Do you go for lots of walks and stuff, or would you say
Yeah.
you're fairly
So
sedentary? What would you say?
so in the beginning, when the social anxiety and the chronic anxiety melted away, I was able to go to the gym. Before that, it was just too much
Mm.
anxiety. I
Wow.
really was I went to the gym all the time. I got down to like 130, which is or 131, which is pretty low for me. And got all my muscles that I had when I was in my 20s, and I worked out on and off most of my adult life. So yeah, no, I hit the gym really hard the first year after I was keto adapted, fat adapted. I did get back into the gym, and then I had a lot of moving, and yeah, I've never been back in the gym I like I was in the first year and a half with keto. But now I just try to move my body,
Mm.
even if it's doing jump rope in my house or going up and down my stairs an
Yeah.
unnecessary amount of times. I'm just trying to be on my feet.
And unnecessary.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
like I'll take if I have
Yeah.
things that need to go downstairs or upstairs, I'll take them one at a time instead of taking a bunch of things. So it's an awareness of just keeping my body more standing up and just moving. I don't necessarily always have to be, running around, but sometimes I have a dance
Mm.
session with myself in the house. Um,
Yep.
and I just go for, walks in the park or on the beach here. And I just try to not, I'm never in bed. That's one thing that keto cured me of. I do not sit in bed all day. And my life was spent in bed.
Mm.
It really, really was. But once I'm up, I have the
Mm. I can understand that because you didn't want to leave home though. I mean, if you're stuck at home all day, if you're going to sit around, you might as well sit around in bed. Let's face it. But yeah, you're right. There's your whole mental attitude is like, hey, I got things to do. I can't be sitting around all day.
and in my case, yeah, and in my case, I have a lot of catching up to do.
Mm.
Um, Remember, I raised my children in a traumatic environment.
Mm.
They were raised with someone who was very ill. So, they struggle as adults. And so there's that to deal with and manage constantly. And like I said, I couldn't finish my education. I feel in a lot of ways very much behind other adults that had a life where they could go out of the house and pursue goals.
Mm.
And I didn't, it's only the past 6 years that I've gained any ground um, on anything, quite frankly. The first thing I had to do was to start to go through my trauma. And that was not possible before keto. So keto took away my bipolar. I don't know if it's going to take away whoever's watching. I don't know what it's going to do for you. For me, it zapped the bipolar away, but I still had OCD, body dysmorphia, borderline personality disorder, complex trauma, auditory processing disorder, cognitive dysfunction. Like, I still had all of this
Mm.
other stuff that I had to deal with. But having my stable nervous system, having the brain energy and cellular energy, thanks to keto, I was now able to pursue um, healing from these other ailments and other disorders. So the first thing I did was I went through a very intense complex trauma program. It was a 3-month program, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but very, very necessary. So,
Mm.
yeah, there's 6 years later, I'm still going through the 41 years of hell, okay, that I have to unravel and process. My life is not like rainbows and unicorns, but I have a fighting chance
Mm.
now. I have a fighting chance of creating a life that I want to live.
Okay. Um, what's your opinion? I know I'm stepping back a step here, but these people who wear a continuous glucose monitor, because you mentioned with the ketones, for example, and I think some people on ketosis will then go and slap a continuous glucose monitor on their arm because it's so fashionable at the moment. I see so many people at the gym with these things on. I did ask one person, he said, I'm type 1 diabetic. I said, oh, fair enough.
Hmm.
He, of all people, does need to keep an eye on his glucose. But there's so many other people are doing it just because it's the new fashionable thing to do. And I'm thinking if you're in ketosis and you have one of those, I know, for example, at breakfast time, there's actually a phrase for it that you get a spike in glucose, regardless. You've come out of fasting all night.
The dawn effect, I believe, is that's what it's called.
Yeah, dawn effect.
Yeah.
Exactly, the dawn effect. And so it'll bounce up. So if somebody's got a glucose monitor on, they'll probably also find when they get to the gym, they start exercising, again, they'll get a glucose spike. And that's just your body creating its own glucose out of your ketones or out of your fat,
Hmm.
because that's the thing that the body can do. It can make its own glucose whenever it wants. Um, Another little known fact.
Gluconeogenesis.
Yeah, exactly. Our bodies are so smart, and people are so dumb in thinking that our bodies don't know what they're doing. Um, so that's why I think a lot of these people who wear these CGMs are probably getting more information than they know what to do with, and then they go down the wrong path because, oh, I'm not in ketosis. I'm creating all this glucose. What's going on? So anyway, I'm just rambling.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I think with CGMs, it could be helpful, especially like for someone like me. I would love to get one just to see exactly how and when and what really affects my glucose and my insulin. It would be beneficial for me, but because I wouldn't obsess over it. But a lot of us do have very inconsistent ketones. They're all over the place. And you have no idea why. You're like, I
Yeah.
haven't added anything into my diet new. I'm pretty much doing the same thing. What is it? Well, maybe you had a very difficult conversation with someone and it affected your glucose. Maybe you can gain some insight into how your emotional state can affect, your glucose and all of that. So it could be useful if you're ready to really dive into things
Mm.
and you're very curious and you're having trouble stabilizing your ketones,
Yeah.
so I think it could be very useful. I would love to.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
also with your ketones, bear in mind you're getting ketones from the food you're eating, but you're also burning ketones from your bum. You are literally, all of us have body fat on us, and there's every chance that your body says, well, I could do with some more right now. I'll go and grab some, I'll convert some body fat into ketones and use them for food. And so then you'll have more ketones. So again, that's the thing. Your body is as adept. That's AD. It's a very hard word for a Kiwi to say. Adept. Is your body is very good at making judgments and altering itself and its whole physiology to do whatever it damn well wants based on based on the situation it's at. So bear that in mind. I'm just thinking for people listening, bear that in mind too with your ketone monitor, because if you've been fasted for 2 or 3 days and you're thinking, man, what will my ketones be like? They're probably bouncing off the roof because your body is converting all of that body fat to keep you running.
Yeah, and it's not. I don't know. Well, let me say one more thing about
Yeah,
the ketones. So for ketones, for someone with mental health struggles, okay, like what I had, especially in the beginning, or maybe the first, year or a year and a half,
yeah,
per Georgia Eid, okay, that's my teacher. I've also studied with Denise Potter and Beth Zupek. She does believe if you to try to keep it around 1.5 consistently. So depending on what you're trying to treat, are you just in the keto game for longevity? Okay, we'll put a pin in that. If you're having serious mental health issues, yes, you might benefit, especially in the beginning, the first year or so, by having your ketones consistently round the clock at about 1.5 ish. Okay. Again, you have to experiment and everybody's different. If you're in it just for longevity, like you're already feeling great, do you really need to obsess about ketones? I think if you're in ketosis most of the time, some you come out, I don't know if that's so much a problem. I think there's also something great about
Yeah.
remaining metabolically flexible. So I couldn't really, yeah, I was not able for a very long time. I didn't really have that much metabolic flexibility. And what that means for me in my case is the minute I have, some non keto stuff, I'm just in bad
Mm.
shape pretty much immediately. I would feel just awful, terrible. 6 years in, I just spent probably 3 months completely out of ketosis the past 3 months. And not that I mean I still can't eat bread. I can't touch, pasta or anything like standard American stuff. But I could do, I was having some keto chips and I was having keto ice cream. And at the end of the day, I was probably 50 to 100 grams of carbs. But my bipolar symptoms never came back. My chronic pain didn't come back. Did not have the
Mm.
energy levels that I was used to. Got tired after I ate, which
Yeah.
I did not miss. So ultimately, I always come back home. I'm, totally ketogenic now. And every time I come back home, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just feel so much better. Life is so much better in ketosis for me. So it's something that
Mm.
I try to stay into. It benefits. Uh, it benefits. I don't need to go to 1.5 or 2. I just need to be in some sort of ketosis, and I do well.
Mm. Okay. So, your opinion on fasting?
Yeah. So I don't eat until about 5 o'clock
Oh,
every day. I do have a little bit of heavy whipping cream in my light coffee. I don't have a lot of caffeine. It's just kind of a quarter caffeine, and then the rest is decaf. And I have a
okay.
little heavy whipping cream.
Okay.
And then I don't eat until 5. I'm just focusing on my hydration. I drink a lot of water. I drink more now than ever.
Mm.
I drink hydrogen water, which has made a tremendous difference as well. And I would try to do about an 80-hour fast once a year because it is tough for me. But now at this point in my life, I'm not doing the longer fasts anymore because it ends up triggering some of my eating disorder, believe it or not, some of the binge eating. So I'm okay with just doing intermittent fasting. It's better for me.
Mm. 80 hours is that's a long fast.
Yeah, it's a little bit more than 72 hours because I don't count from the minute I put the last forkful in my mouth.
Yeah.
I give myself like 8 hours to kind of digest and then I'll start the fast to be fair. Because I'm
Right.
like, you're not really fasting 72 hours if you start it at the last forkful.
Yeah.
Um, but I did it a few times and it's just tough for me. And how I move in this world with the amount of trauma that I have, I just listen to my body. I don't shame myself if I can't do the latest fad of fasting or this or that. I listen to my body. I respect the signals that it's giving me. And then I also look a little bit deeper into why is this so difficult? Is there something emotional happening? Is there some sort of trauma that's being triggered? And then I work from there.
Okay.
So at this time, I will not be pursuing any long fasts. I just do my intermittent
Okay.
fasting.
So, if you don't eat until 5 and then after that do you graze for the time until what? Or it's really only you'd have to be what you call OMAD then, isn't it? One meal a day, because I guess you then eat from 5 to what, 7 p.m., and that's it.
Yeah, so I work a little bit at night. I have a little gig at night, so I end up eating kind of late. But I will eat around. I'll eat something, a small meal. Well, sometimes I eat a steak. Basically, I eat from 5 to 9, honestly, or maybe even 10 because I get home very late. Not an ideal
Mm,
time. I know a
yeah.
lot of people say you shouldn't be eating that late. Well, too bad. That's what I do. And when my life changes and I can eat in a different window, then I will. But right now, I hate eating during the day. I cannot focus. It just ruins everything for me. I hate having breakfast. This works for me, and that's what I do. So yeah, it's like from 5 to 10. It's very late because of my schedule.
And it's what your body is used to. So your body has developed itself around it. So
Yeah.
if it doesn't affect you, if it's not keeping you
Hmm.
awake at night, then who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
You mentioned earlier, I just want to delve into this a little bit, um, because I have an opinion on this as well. And it's if there's one thing that draws a lot of excitement, it's the talking about cheat days.
Mm.
Um, now, I personally believe in them, and every now and again I'll have a cheat day. And if I'm away, I'll I'll enjoy myself. If I'm out with friends, I will eat normal food. I won't go to a restaurant and go, oh, I can't eat any of that. I'm on keto. Have you got any keto on your menu? And they look at you like it's funny if you're a vegan. Oh yes, we've got all sorts of
Yeah,
vegan recipes. What would you like? But if you said keto, it's like, oh, what's wrong with you?
yeah,
Um, so I do tend to have cheat days, and it doesn't bother me as long as I get back on the wagon afterwards.
yeah. So for me, again, I think for those of us with an addiction, a history of food addiction, or emotional eating, and things like the chronic pain or depression and anxiety, I don't recommend cheat days. You can have a cheat half a meal,
Okay.
but I
Mm,
personally, I'll just speak from my own experience. No, I can't have a cheat day because then it's going to be 2 days of more negative thoughts, more negative filter. I'm not going to be sharp for my clients, and it's just not worth it. And I'm going to be swollen immediately. I look a little chubbier, and that drives my BDD, the body dysmorphia, crazy. So for me, I cannot have a day. I could sample. So let's say I don't know, I'm at a restaurant and there's just something that has sugar in it. I will have a fork, I'll have a bite, and I can sample and I can still function the next few days. I'm pretty much okay. There's a few um there's a few hacks, let me tell you. Okay. So here's how I get around feeling
okay.
awful. Here's how I get around feeling terrible with having sugar or something that's not keto. If I know ahead of time that I'm probably going to sample some stuff that's not keto at an event or I don't know, on a cruise or whatever, what I have to do is I have to limit my overall calories that day. I cannot have the same amount of calories and have something that's not keto. If I'm going to have a half of a cheat meal or something, I have to make sure that I'm fasted and that my calories for the day are a lot lower. Then I can get away with it because
Okay.
I'm going to burn through the glucose
Ah,
more quickly if I'm only
right.
having, 800 calories or that day. And I can get back into ketosis more
Mm,
quickly. I'm not going to have as much inflammation or any oxidative stress happening. So,
yeah.
and then the other hack is potassium. That's a whole other conversation for me. Is my potassium
Yeah.
intake.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. It is interesting you say that, because there was one time when I had to go down for a sales trip down south, and I did eat a lot of crap, and I felt like shit. Sorry about the French. I did feel not great mentally the following day, so I just stopped eating and I did a 24-hour fast. And that was like you say, the benefit
Hmm.
of the 24-hour fast is that my body had to use all that food to to run itself. And
Right.
so it got it out of my system and I got back to normal. And it did take a day or two for my mind to, I wouldn't go so far as to say depressed, but certainly my mind to function positively again. Um,
Absolutely.
so yeah, I do notice that too. If I have sugar in me, my emotions can be a little bit negative, and it's amazing how at the time you don't realize, hey, hang on, that's because of that food I ate yesterday. Um, and then going back to normal food, what you and I call normal food, um, ketogenic food, and then a couple of days later you forget all about those feelings because they're gone.
Yeah.
They're not there anymore. It's like you stub your toe, it hurts, but when your toe has fixed itself, you forget all about your stub toe.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So
And yeah, no,
yeah,
fasting the day after, if you do have a whole day of cheating, you really need to, because that's a lot of inflammation. And I mean, I've seen
yeah,
some studies or some information online that it puts a lot of stress on our arteries, and I don't want to do that, especially if I'm having typically a high fat diet. I do not want any arterial damage happening. And so that's another reason why I will not have a full cheat
no,
meal or a full cheat day, because I'm trying to protect my vascular health.
mm, good call. So how can people get to?
Yeah.
First of all, Mia, you're a ketogenic lifestyle coach. Is that something that if I had, or not if I had, if one of our listeners um, was suffering, they can get in touch with you about?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, the best way, I'm on Twitter, I'm on X, so it's Mia Mendez, or you can also type in Recover with Mia, and that will come up on X. And then you can shoot me an email at info@recoverwithmia.com. Hopefully, I'll have my website up in a few months, but it's just a landing page. But I have that email accessible right to my phone all the time. I get inquiries from people all over the world. I love it. It's challenging, and I also do the coaching for the complex trauma and just trauma in general. If you've had a difficult childhood, if you've been diagnosed with borderline and anxiety, and you have a poor self image, those kinds of things, I really help people to um, recognize those deep core beliefs and, adjust core beliefs, become more positive about themselves and just about life in general. So I do both of those things. I handle the
Mm,
mental stuff, the biological stuff as best I can.
that is really good. That's brilliant because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who kind of feel that there's no help out there and that they're at a dead end. And this is where they need to, like you say, they can follow you or they can send you a DM or they can email you. I'll put your Recover with Mia and your Mia Mendez information on the show notes, anyhow.
Yeah. And I think I want to say one more thing. So when people watch some of my podcast uh, appearances, especially when I was on Bipolar Cast, so that was the first podcast that I was on probably over 2 years ago. And Bipolar Cast um, uh, is led by Dr. Ian Campbell, who's one of the foremost researchers in this field, metabolic field, in Scotland,
Yeah.
and Matt Bazuki, which we know, his mother runs the Bazuki Brain Research Foundation and Metabolic Mind. Well, his family does, but I think his mom specifically has Metabolic Mind. Um, so I was interviewed by them, and I'm telling my story on Bipolar Cast, and it is a miraculous recovery. It is. But I think people expect to have the same experience, and it's not always the case. It doesn't always mean you're going to be able to be off medication pretty much immediately. There is a place
Mm-hmm.
for
Yeah.
medication. I don't like medication. I don't take it because I don't need it. It would be great if we were on less medication, but I just want people to know my results might not exactly be how the way my results unfolded may not be the way yours unfolds, and you must be patient. And whether it's with me or somebody else who's going to lead you through the ketogenic way of eating, you have got to listen to them, because I have people who they won't listen because they get very impatient. They want 6 week results like I had, and they don't want to listen about water intake, electrolytes, and certain other habits, and they get very impatient and self sabotage. So, just to everyone out there, you've got to do your due diligence, and you really should have somebody, helping you along the way.
Mm. That's right. And that's where people fall off the wagon, because it starts off, like newlyweds. It starts off the honeymoon session and you feel great, but there is so much more to it. Like you've said,
So
the
much more.
keto flu, when that hits, you just need to know what you're expecting. And so when it does hit, you go, I've been waiting for you.
Yeah,
Nice to meet you. And
exactly.
then a day or two later, of course, you're fine. And it's like toodle pip. But if you didn't know that was coming, you'd be thinking, and so many people write about it in magazines, mainly people who have never been in keto before. They talk about the keto flu because they want to put people off it. And
Mhm.
so they talk about the keto flu and how terrible it's going to be, and it'll be worse than any COVID you've ever had, and all this sort of crap, and
It's
it puts
definitely
people
not
off. So
that
it's just
bad.
good for you to know what to expect.
Yeah, I put my son on keto. Yeah, I so the keto when I put my son on keto, and I had the luxury of controlling everything he ate and everything he did. So it was very easy for me. He barely had it. He had maybe 1 or 2 days where he was a little tired, but because I was in full control and I didn't have to battle with a client not listening to me, I just kind of forced it on him. He had no keto flu. He went right
Mm,
through the whole thing, no problem. And so I said to myself, see, I'm like, if my clients listen to me, they wouldn't even go through the keto flu, probably. You know what I mean? Um,
yeah,
but there's such a frustration because if you don't listen to the coach, if you don't do keto correctly, if you're not informed about troubleshooting and preventing some of the things that can happen on keto, like muscle cramps, insomnia, your fluid balance is off. It's all completely avoidable, most of it, or there is actually a pretty quick, easy fix. If they don't have that knowledge,
yeah,
then they get online and they blog and they say, oh my gosh, keto's the worst. I was in the hospital with heart palpitations. I couldn't sleep. It's the worst diet ever. No, you weren't doing it
yeah,
correctly. You didn't know what the hell you were doing. Don't talk bad about my diet,
no,
okay? You weren't doing it
yeah,
right.
that's right. And now you're listening to twats on the internet telling you how you shouldn't do it in the
Yeah.
first place because they know better.
It's
So
safe, effective, it's evidence based. So,
yeah, it is. It is evidence based. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, and you're right. It is evidence based, and it's not voodoo, and it's not. It's just not mumbo jumbo. It is correct at the metabolic level, and it's the metabolic level that our bodies have been designed for the last, I bang
mhm,
on about this a lot, for 600,000 years we have been eating a ketogenic diet. For
yes,
50 years we've been eating a carbohydrate diet, and people say that we're doing the fad diet.
I know. I know.
That really annoys the crap out of me.
Same here.
It's like, hang on, which one of us is doing the fad diet? Yeah. So
You ain't kidding.
anyway, right. Well, thank you very much for joining me today, Mia, and spending the time. You did spend a lot more time than we predicted because, as I said, we had all sorts of technical issues at the start. So thank you very much for your time. I will put your information on the show notes. And incidentally, if you're listening to this as a podcast, then it will also go on to my YouTube channel, which is also called See Your Toes Again, as a proper video, as the video between us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.